ሰላም ጤና ይስጥልን። እንዴት አላችሁ? እንዴት አደራችሁ? እንዴት ዋላችሁ? ከያላችሁበት በሙሉ እዚህ ሲምፖዚየም ላይ ለመታደም ለተገኛችሁ በጣም ምስጋናችንን ማቅረብ እንፈልጋለን። እንዴት ሰነበታችሁ? እንግዲህ ዛሬ አራተኛው የሆነውን የኢትዮጵያ ሚዲያ ለሰላም የሚለውን ሲምፖዚየም የመጨረሻ ክፍል ላይ ደርሰናል። ከዚህ በፊት 3 አድርገን አሁን አራተኛው ላይ ደርሰናል። እንግዲህ እስካሁን ድረስ አብራችሁ ለነበራችሁ ከዛ ደግሞ ዛሬም የመጨረሻው ላይ ለተገኛችሁ በሙሉ እንዴት አላችሁ እንላለን። በድጋሚ ምስጋናችንን ማቅረብ እንፈልጋለን። Hello, greetings. Thank you for joining us today from all over the world. And today is the last session of the 4-part symposium on Ethiopian media for peace. Today's session is subtitled Institutional Approaches and Policies to Address Hate Speech and Dissemination and Recommendations and Feedbacks. እንግዲህ ከዚህ በፊት የነበረውን የተከታተላችሁ ተመልካቾቻችን የመጀመሪያውን ክፍል ያደረግነው የጥላቻ ንግግርና የውሸት መረጃ ለእርስ በርስ ቀውስ እንዴት ይዳርገናል ሚለውን ተመልክተናል። በሁለተኛው ሳምንት ደግሞ የጥላቻ ንግግርና የሐሰተኛ መረጃ ላይ ያለውን የሚዲያ ሮል ተነጋግረን ነበረ። እንዲሁም ደግሞ ሚዲያ ምን አይነት ሚና መጫወት ይችላል የሰላም ግንባታ ላይ የሚለውን በሶስተኛ ሳምንት ባለፈው ሳምንት በማህበራዊ ድረገጾች ወይንም ሶሻል ሚዲያ በመንላቸው ላይ እንዴት ነው የጥላቻ ንግግርን በመቀነስ ለሰላም የሚደረግን ንግግር መጨመር ወይንም ማሻሻል የሚቻለው የሚለውን ተመልክተን ነበረ። እንግዲህ ዛሬ ወደ ማጠቃለያው የመጣ ነው። ማጠቃለያው ላይ ደግሞ የምናደርገው የተቋማዊ አፕሮች ወይንም ተቋሞች ማድረግ አለባቸው እንዲሁም ደግሞ በፖሊሲ ደረጃ የጥላቻ ንግግርንና ሐሰተኛ መረጃን እንዴት መዋጋት መከላከል እንችላለን የሚለውን እንመለከታለን። ሁልጊዜ እንደምናደርገው እንግዲህ ፕሮግራማችን የሚሆነው በእንግሊዝኛ ነው። በማስቀደም ይቅርታ እንጠይቃለን በአማርኛ ባለማድረጋችን። እንግዲህ ይሄንን ያደረግነው እስከዛሬ ድረስ ያደረግናቸው ውይይቶች ከዓለም ዙሪያ ያሉ ተሞክሮችን እንዲያካፍሉን የተለያዩ እንግሊዝኛ ተናጋሪ እንግዶችን ስለጋበዝን ነው። ዛሬም ይኖሩናል። ስለዚህ ነው እንግዲህ በእንግሊዝኛ የምናደርገው። ከይቅርታ ጋር እንግዲህ ወደ እንግሊዝኛ እንመልሰዋለን ፕሮግራማችንን ማለት ነው። As you all know, the first week we had effects of hate speech and disinformation on intergroup conflict. On the second week, we talked about media role in confronting hate speech, disinformation, and peace building. Last week, on the third session, we talked about reducing hate speech and promoting peace dialogue on social media. And today, as a conclusion, we're going to be talking about institutional approaches and policies to address hate speech and disinformation, as well as recommendations, and we'll take feedbacks and your reflections from our audience. You'll find the videos of the previous 3 sessions on Ethiopia PDCI YouTube channel. If you haven't watched them already, please do. I highly recommend them, and I also encourage you to share it within your network because we have shared insights, and then different experiences that could help us fight hate speech and disinformation. We shared tons of wisdom. So this symposium, the Symposium on Ethiopian Media for Peace, is brought to you by Peace and Development Center International, PDCI, and the Ethiopian Media Council, and the virtual event organizer is Flawless Events. I am your moderator throughout the session. My name is Meti Shwaye Yilma. I am a media and communication professional and founder of Queendom Media. Let me introduce you our sponsors, the 2 organizations that brought this symposium. The first one is Peace and Development Center International, PDCI. It's an independent, non-partisan, not-for-profit, and non-governmental organization established in the United States of America by senior international professionals of Ethiopian origin who are committed to promoting peace in Ethiopia. PDCI is committed to promoting and fostering a culture of peace, reconciliation, and nonviolence, preventing and resolving conflicts for peaceful coexistence, and advancing socio-economic development to build a just, equitable, and peaceful Ethiopia. PDCI is a neutral arbiter and convener it doesn't take sides. PDCI partners, collaborates, and supports PDC Ethiopia in furthering peace among the Ethiopian society throughout the world. PDCI cooperates with all peace lovers to promote economic development and abolish poverty, disease, and illiteracy from Ethiopia. The second sponsor is the Ethiopian Media Council. The Ethiopian Media Council is an independent civil society organization registered under the proclamation that governs CSOs in Ethiopia. The council was formed following a General Assembly held in January 2016, and currently it has around 50 members that include publishers, broadcasters, as well as media associations. Ethiopian Media Council aims to promote press freedom and build journalists' capacity. EMC is run by its executive committee, chaired by Ato Amara Aragawi, and the deputy chairperson is Wezaro Ma'aza Birru. At the present time, PDCI is deeply concerned by the outbreak of violence and escalation of conflict in the Tigray region, as well as around the country, and the devastating impacts on civilian loss of life and the looming humanitarian crisis. PDCI has repeatedly called for and continues its call for an immediate ceasefire and dialogue to resolve differences. Just to give you the objectives of the Symposium on Ethiopian Media for Peace, it has 4 objectives. The first one is to increase awareness of issues, best practices, and challenges related to hate speech, disinformation, and peace building. The second objective is empower participants to be agents of change for the dissemination of accurate information and peace building. The third objective is to increase awareness of measures that can be adopted to counterattack mitigate hate speech and disinformation and promote peace building. And the fourth objective is to produce Ethiopian Media Declaration on countering hate speech and disinformation and promoting peace building. So now let me just give you a housekeeping before I invite our first speaker. We have a discussion wall on the social events platform, which you are registered in, and some of you are watching this from that. So use the platform to post your questions and to engage in the discussion. Particularly today, since it's our last session, we would like to hear your reflections. So please, in addition to the questions, which we'll be addressing to our speakers later on, add your reflections as well. What did you expect and what have you found from the symposium? And also what your commitments are in terms of fighting hate speech and disinformation. So keep it coming on social platform. As I said, the last 3 sessions, you'll find the videos on PDCI Ethiopia YouTube channel. So let me invite the first speaker for today. We have speakers because this is the last session and we wanted to address institutional approaches and policy issues. So the first person who will be speaking today will be Mr. Castro Wesamba. He's Chief of Office of the United Nations Office on Genocide Prevention and the Responsibility to Protect. Mr. Wesamba has over 20 years of experience in multilateral affairs, worked as an advisor on Africa region in the OSAPG for over 10 years, including as a senior political advisor to the special representative of the Secretary General in South Sudan, as well as Deputy Chief of Staff of the United Nations Mission in South Sudan. Prior to joining the UN, Mr. Wesamba worked for the government of Kenya for 13 years, serving in different positions covering regional peace, security, human rights, and other multilateral issues. He was an expert delegate to the Human Rights and Humanitarian Affairs Committee of the United Nations General Assembly between 2001 and 2005. In 2005, he served as coordinator of the African group of the Third Committee of the General Assembly. So, ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming Mr. Castro Wesamba, Chief of Office of the United Nations Office on Genocide Prevention and the Responsibility to Protect. Welcome to the symposium, Mr. Wesamba.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Rabia, and I hope everyone can hear me clearly.
Yes.
Yes, thanks for the introduction. And, first of all, let me just thank the organizers for putting together this symposium, particularly at this time, not only just in the context of Ethiopia, but generally the global trends that are happening. And it is a very important action that the organizers have taken to have a discussion and raise awareness about hate speech and what measures do we need to put in place, lessons learned, other best practices from different actors on itself. I would like just to put in context as why I was invited to this to speak at this symposium, and what is the role of my office. I work for the United Nations Office on Genocide Prevention and the Responsibility to Protect. And in simple terms, it means that our office is an early warning mechanism within the United Nations system-wide on the risk of genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and ethnic cleansing, which in many cases we refer to as atrocity crimes. So when you speak, when I speak, I'll be speaking to this, that I work as an early warning within the UN system. But besides that, we also have an additional responsibility within the United Nations system as focal point to implement the UN strategy and plan of action on hate speech. So your discussion on hate speech, misinformation, disinformation is very much spot on and aligned with the mandate of our office on genocide prevention and responsibility to protect, as well as the priorities of the United Nations. I'm here to share with you a few of the institutional experiences that we have had. One is that it's increasingly very clear that hate speech is becoming a very worrying trend globally, and it's not just something that is unique to single out that is in Ethiopia, but it's something that is a global trend. We are seeing hate speech being used to erode the social cohesion, undermine democracy, and put the marginalized and vulnerable populations at more risk in many places. Even in developed democracies, we have seen, the integration of people, migrants, refugees, using hate speech. And as somebody who has worked in this field for very many times, we know the context of hate speech. So it's not something that we should take very casually about. Hate speech has been used as a precursor and very many times has been a very indicative risk factor in terms of the risk of atrocity crimes, genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. And in my presentation, I would just like to lay out and share with you institutional experience of why the United Nations at this time is very much concerned with the worrying trends of hate speech, which is actually causing quite a lot of xenophobia around the world, racism, intolerance, including anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim hatred around the world, and targeting the most vulnerable people in our society. Therefore, when we look at this in global trend and we see the challenges that Ethiopia is facing, we should even be more concerned about this. Because if we don't address it early enough and in the correct way, then it will grow into something bigger that everybody worries about. And many times we say never again should we see a population being attacked on the basis of their identity and to the extreme form it leads to the intent to destroy a certain identity group, race, ethnicity, nationality, for the purpose of that. It's the very most egregious international crime that can be committed. Therefore, we are not just saying hate speech because we are worried about the trends, but also what can be the effect on it. But also there's the other side of it, of where we have to say and be very cautious that we are not saying that we want to prohibit speech or hate speech, because everything must be done within international law, and we must protect the freedoms of expression and opinion. Therefore, when we talk about addressing and countering hate speech, even in the context of Ethiopia, we must all remember that we want more speech, not less speech. Okay, so by saying we want to counter and address hate speech and the measures we are putting in place, they should not infringe the fundamental freedoms of the expression and opinion themselves. It must be in line with international law and international practice. We have seen many governments around the world, in the name of addressing hate speech, shutting down the whole communication structure of the country, shutting down the internet, shutting down the radio, the television, and putting the population in complete darkness. And even those who want to assist the population that is affected do not have the necessary information to address that population. That's not dealing with hate speech. It is infringing on the fundamental rights of the people and actually exposing to the population that is already at risk to more harm than actually protecting and saving lives of those people. So these are some of the things that, even in the context of Ethiopia, and I was reading the trends of the military operations in the northern part of the country, in Tigray, and already clearly you see that these people don't have information, people cannot communicate, people cannot gather what the facts are, and at their end vulnerable populations that needs to be protected. And if we don't have communication and we have the media to tell us what is exactly happening, it becomes very difficult to decide how you can assist people. Therefore, we have been encouraging many governments to put into consideration those fundamental freedoms when they are providing legislation to deal, to counter and address hate speech. As the focal point for the UN strategy and plan of action, we have internally, as the United Nations, developed a very specific definition of what constitutes hate speech. But this is for the purposes of the work of the United Nations. But as usual, we're an international organization, and we encourage our partners, the media, the governments, the forum that is here, the participants, that we use this standard because it's not invasive to the existing legal obligations under various international law on the freedoms of expression and opinion. So I'll just read very carefully what the definition, according to the United Nations understanding of what constitutes hate speech. We at the United Nations, we understand hate speech as any kind of communication in speech, writing, or behavior that attacks or uses pejorative or discriminatory language with reference to a person or a group on the basis of who they are, based on their religion, ethnicity, nationality, race, color, descent, gender, or other forms of identity. Okay. So we have tried very much, to kind of make people understand that what is prohibited under international law is incitement to violence, incitement to discrimination, hostility, and of course, under the Genocide Convention, incitement to genocide is prohibited and punishable. So there is a very clear legal definition to incitement, but there's no legal definition to hate speech. But nevertheless, the trends are worrying enough that this symposium and the organizers and the United Nations and many actors across the world have realized that we must develop some tools to tackle this hate speech on itself. Now, of course, as I go down the lane, I will try to share with you some specific measures within the United Nations as what could be done to address hate speech, including in the context of Ethiopia's situation itself, because this is what it's all about. And therefore, I will not just speak about the global trends, but rather share the experiences as what can be done to address the situation that Ethiopia finds itself today. First, I would like to say that when you have a chance, take a look at our framework of analysis. It's our tool within the United Nations that informs us about what are the risks of genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and ethnic cleansing. You know, at the moment, of course, in the midst of violence, we always want to make references to the humanitarian crisis. We want to make references to human rights violations and abuses. Okay, it's very important because those things are indicative of a bigger problem, and the bigger problem is the most serious international crimes. When there is systematic and widespread attack or attacks against civilian population with serious violations of human rights law and international humanitarian law, then we are facing a bigger problem than just actually those violations. It could be that international crimes could be committed. Therefore, it is very important to raise awareness if we're trying to talk about addressing hate speech. What are the consequences of hate speech? In its worst form, it leads to incitement and even incitement to genocide. Under the Genocide Convention, we know that there is four protected groups. Okay, we have race, ethnicity, nationality, and on religious basis. But of course, there are other groups that we must be mindful about. When we see certain patterns in a country, for example, I will use Ethiopia because you have a better understanding and deep understanding than I do about Ethiopia. But of course, if we're gonna have a narrative that defines them against us, that communication and information that is disseminated to attack or cause harm or denigrate the people on the basis of their nationality or religion or ethnicity, it's a worrying trend. We have monitored quite a number of situations of which we can confidently say that it's indicative that international crimes that I'm referring to have been committed. And I think it's important for us to learn lessons. If we don't learn, we tend to commit the same mistakes. If you look at what happened in Rwanda before 1994 in the commission of the genocide in Rwanda, that's when everybody realized words can kill. Okay, words can be very dangerous because they did not start with the machetes. They did not start with guns or violence. No, they started with words. They started using language that was discriminative. They denigrated a specific group and used dehumanizing language that reduced those people to be non-humans. So they would use even sometimes language that refers to the Tutsi community, like things, like objects. Now, this kind of language actually inspires the whole society to start viewing the other group as not equal human beings. And to the extreme form, we saw that the people who committed the genocide in 1994 against the Tutsi in Rwanda were ordinary people. They were not trained people. They were not militias. Of course, there was the militia, Interahamwe militia, but the ordinary people took up machetes and killed their neighbors. Why? Because over a long period of time, over the media and even offline on radio, that was very common at that time, it was very clear that the lives of the Tutsi did not matter. And they used a very pejorative language that reduced the lives of these people to objects. And therefore, it was very easy for the neighbor to attack the other person without feeling that this is another human being, that you're committing this serious violation on itself. At the end, we had, within just a short period of time, almost over 800,000 people having been murdered systematically just on the basis of their identity. But that is in the extreme form of genocide on itself. We have seen other extreme cases of violence, and in Ethiopia, which has played a very significant role in promoting peace in the region, we have seen that, in South Sudan, what started as a political conflict quickly degenerated into ethnic rivalry between groups. And of course, that ethnic rivalry did not start the day violence broke out in 2013. There was already ethnic narratives that were being propagated in South Sudan prior to 2013. And, if you talk to a child to speak about the Nuer, or the Nuer to speak about the Dinka, they will give you a different narrative on itself. What did this lead to? Of course, we have seen the worst forms of violence on African continent being committed in South Sudan, in which they massacred very many people on that. Thirdly, of course, that example, and I'll go very quickly, is Central African Republic. A rebel group that was moving down to Bangui to seize power, and there were differences in the capital, Bangui, and degenerated into violence. Of course, the narrative was quickly changed between the Muslims and Christians. And when these rebel groups, who were predominantly Muslim, arrived in Bangui, all of a sudden, there were so many attacks against the Christian communities in Bangui itself. That is very informative, and Ethiopia should not take this for granted, that these narratives can lead to something very serious. And Africa has suffered quite a lot. Ethiopia was on the road of development, but if we have to accommodate this kind of dissemination of misinformation, disinformation, and hate messages permeating our societies, then we have very bad examples around the continent that we have to do something about hate speech. But we also encourage from the United Nations that it's not just about one country, that has to deal with this. Everybody should all the time put preventative measures, counter hate speech, address hate speech, disinformation, because those are the seeds of discord. Even in developed democracies, we have seen what has happened in the United States, that it's not immune unless you have safeguards that can deal with this vitriolic language. Then you end up with violence, or you end up with various systematic and widespread violations of human rights that finally will translate into atrocity crimes. So in terms of what can we do if this is the case, we know, and speaking from the decisional perspective, that hate speech can lead to these things that I just talked about, and the examples I've given about. In terms of even going outside the Africa continent, you look at what is happening in the northern part of Myanmar and how the Rohingya population is being treated. in the country, and thousands and hundreds of thousands of them are in refugee camps in the neighboring countries, in Bangladesh and other places, is very worrying. So the ethnic rhetoric that is prevailing in the country, the nationalism centric politics on itself in Ethiopia is a very dangerous discourse on itself. And to do the prevention, it's not just Ethiopian actors or asking the government to do more. Of course, one of the things that we can ask for what has happened in our past few days in the country is we need also to deal with the question of impunity. Of course, if you don't punish those who have committed these serious attacks in various places in Oromia, when I read the African Union statement on the 1st of November, that tens of people were killed in Oromia, based on their identity. The only question I ask is, what is the government doing to investigate and hold the perpetrators of that violence to account? Also, all the reports, anywhere we have serious allegations of civilians being attacked, whether by the military forces or by any armed group, there should be investigations and to hold accountable those who commit such serious violations. Because if you don't do that, then they are the same people who resort back to go to the platforms and encourage violence within the community using the media narratives on themselves. But in terms of what is the role, particularly this symposium is looking at the role of the media. One is that we can counter and address hate speech by disseminating counter narratives. Okay, so we should not just allow those who are spewing hate to have the bigger voice. Those that actually have the moderate voice or the counter narrative to those who are coming out to plant the seeds of discord in the society, that they should not just be allowed to do that, that we should have counter narratives. And of course, the media has a very big role to play by carrying out editorials for the social platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Google, and others. Can do fact check, and we have seen even in the United States it's working. So people should not believe what is false. We have had many places I've worked in conflict situations. When two people have been killed, of course it's always bad enough that two people are killed. But then the opposite side are told 2,000 people, our people, have been killed. And the people get outraged. If they killed 2,000 of our people, we will have to revenge. And revenge in a very massive way because of dissemination of false information or disinformation or misinformation of the populations, leading to other actions that become very destructive on themselves. So it's important to do the fact check, to post those counter narratives. It's important to empower alternative, moderate voices within our societies. And the media should give that platform to those kind of voices, including institutions, regional mechanisms like African Union, IGAD, the United Nations, and other actors. The media can give platforms for those institutions to give counter narratives. It's important within the Ethiopian society itself for us to give moderate voices, whether they're religious leaders, community leaders. They can play a role in terms of giving, empowering them to give moderate voices. The third point is the constant monitoring and reporting, and then you share that information. Google, Facebook, and Twitter, they're not in the business of monitoring what is being posted over there. They rely very much on you sharing information to tell them, because all these posts are in local languages. It could be in Amharic, it could be in Tigrinya or Somali region. We speak different languages. So it's up to us to inform these big platforms that these messages are dangerous messages, the hateful messages, and that can lead to even these media platforms to take action about what has been posted. But as an office also, we receive this information to kind of take action as United Nations, and we can share with also our partners, regional organizations, to do something. when hateful messages are being propagated. But we can only do that when you, as participants and everybody and every Ethiopian, can share that information and interpret that messages to us. It's also important that the media should not hesitate to remove harmful content on itself, because if you leave it there, then you are actually, giving access to use that and disseminate with one click. That message will be propagated around the world or around the country, and all of a sudden, there's spontaneous violence. Last but not least, of course, we have also seen in some examples where you delay broadcast of certain message. Of course, we know in Africa and many other places, the radio is a very powerful information, the television. You can delay broadcasts by a few seconds. This, I think, you can learn from your neighboring country, Kenya, at the height of the violence. It's not shutting down the information, but delaying the information, because the media has that self-responsibility of self-regulation, that we will see what content is coming there. So if it's a live broadcast and there are certain broadcasts that come out that hateful messages, propagating hate, and you don't have any space to filter what is coming out from that live broadcast itself, especially in the situations where we have a lot of tensions, then it becomes another problem. But we don't want you to shut down broadcast. We don't want you to shut down the whole media in the country in the name of countering and addressing hate speech, because that's not helpful. We want more information, not less information in that sense. I will stop there and possibly invite to speak a little bit more, depending on the questions that the audience have raised and want us to respond to that. Thank you very much, and we hope that we are going to continue this conversation and address the serious risk factors that exist in the country, and that we shall build social cohesion and coexistence among communities in the country and have one country. Thank you. I can hear you.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Castro. We really appreciate what you mentioned, especially from practical examples of Rwanda, from South Sudan, Bangui, and the Rohingya conflicts, because they shed light to what's happening in Ethiopia, and we can get lots of lessons from that and protect our citizens. So thank you very much. I'll have you back for the Q&A session. I'll be collecting questions and we'll address it to you later on. Thank you. And now let me introduce our second speaker. Our second speaker is Samhar Araya. She's head of Diaspora Policy for Facebook Africa, Middle East, and Turkey, or AMET. As head of Diaspora Policy, Samhar provides guidance on the company's policy priorities and opportunities for engagement with AMET diaspora stakeholders outside of the region. The Diaspora Public Policy Team is responsible for identifying and advancing the company's global diaspora policy priorities, managing policy stakeholder relationships, including strategic diaspora communities where human rights risks exist, and developing policy programs that showcase the diaspora's positive social, economic, and cultural impact on Facebook. Now you know why we invite Samhar Araya, because in Ethiopia, the largest social media that has been used for over a decade has been Facebook, and we've seen its impact on the social and political movements happened recently. So Samhar is going to give us a background and what Facebook is doing. Welcome, Samhar, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Metsi. Good morning, everybody from United States. I'm so happy to be a part of this conversation. And I just want to really thank the organizers, the Peace and Development, PDCI, and the community for coming together. This is very personal for me as a daughter of the Horn of Africa, as the daughter of Eritrean immigrants, and having spent nearly 20 years living and working in Eritrea and Ethiopia and visiting Kenya and visiting the wider region. So this is also a timely discussion and a very important one that I'm honored to be a part of. I'd like to spend a bit of the beginning of this conversation really sharing with you Facebook's work in Africa, around the world, and especially in Ethiopia. And I also want to share with you the efforts that are being undertaken to fight hate speech, combat misinformation, and ensure that users in Ethiopia and around the world, including the diaspora, are aware of how to use the platform as a tool for good and how to help mitigate the likelihood of harm on the ground. So I'll start first by just sharing what my role is and how it ties to the work in Ethiopia. Facebook, as you know, is a platform that is used all over the world, 2.9 billion users in countries, in nearly every country in the world. And it's really the primary entry point for so many people who have never had access to the internet, who may not have a computer or a phone. We recognize the importance of Facebook as a day-to-day tool to connect families, to connect communities, and really in many ways serve as a life-saving means of communication and support. For many, this is the first time that they've had a computer or a phone, and there are challenges of digital literacy, there are challenges of connectivity, and so we're very mindful of what this service looks like around the world. So with that, the company views its role not just as a product, but also thinking of policies, positions, rationale, and what kinds of decisions the company needs to think about to ensure that people are having a productive, positive, and safe experience. So with that, we think of Facebook as a tech platform, but behind the scenes, there are teams dedicated to developing policies to reduce risk of harm, to reduce misinformation and hate speech, and to build the capacity of people all over the world in using the tool for good. So I sit on the team that is known as the Africa, Middle East, and Turkey Public Policy Team. This team is based all over the world. In Africa, we have staff in Nairobi, Dakar, Lagos, Johannesburg. We have staff in Dubai. We have staff in London. And over the years, that team has really recognized the importance of engaging with and having presence on the ground. So as we, over the last 6 years since the Facebook Africa, Middle East, and Turkey team was formed, over the last 6 years, we've gone deeper into engaging with and having presence on the continent. For Ethiopia, as part of our East Africa portfolio, we have teams based in Nairobi that directly engage and follow developments in Ethiopia year-round. So before the current situation where tensions have risen and there are deep fears of potential hate speech and misinformation on the platform and around the world, our teams have been going to Ethiopia, to different parts of the country, sitting with stakeholders, understanding the environment, understanding the usage, trying to get a sense of where the risks are, the challenges, and the opportunities. So the first thing is, it's very important for us to share that we are here with Ethiopia and with Ethiopians around the world before, during, and after a crisis. We are also very mindful of the responsibility that we have in helping ensure that people understand the responsibilities and the ways to use the platform. And I think, it's also worth sharing that we're very proud that this team is African-led, and we have Africans at the helm of every position, which helps us not only relate to the challenges through our personal knowledge, but also having familiarity with the environments. So even in this capacity, the role that I sit in, it was very important to have focus on the diaspora. I'll get into the diaspora in a second, but primarily the first message here is that we are really looking at a long-term relationship and presence and improving the product for users around the world with a keen eye on what's appropriate for different environments, different cultures. And those decisions aren't made by the company alone. It's through the engagement such as this. So when we say stakeholder engagement or Facebook is going to Ethiopia, what does that look like? We sit with stakeholders of all backgrounds, and this includes government, non-government, civil society, journalists, small businesses, youth groups, community groups. Our goal is really to understand not only the ecosystem, but help build the capacity of different actors across to use Facebook as a tool to promote their social, economic, or civic issues. This includes human rights concerns. This includes economic issues. This includes things that are just as common as community connections. And so we're very mindful of that responsibility. So with the topic at hand on what companies, how institutions are addressing challenges of hate speech and misinformation, I want to go through a few steps of how our policies, our product, and our approach with people on the ground and around the world look like. From a policy perspective, we've been, in addition to engaging with Ethiopia year-round, we've been closely monitoring the situation on the ground across different teams, led by the public policy team that I'm a part of, led by product policy teams, led by teams that are focused on content policy. And we've had to understand in many ways how language is used on the continent. First, you should know the company actually has a set of standards that we call community standards, which help guide and govern how content is reviewed on the platform. These community standards cover a range of issues that could lead to potential harm and that are considered, if in violation, considered grounds for either suspension, removal, or losing access to certain rights on the platform. These community standards are applied globally. They have been defined from a bottom-up approach, but also modified so that it can exist in a global sense. So it's very hard to create, community standards for each specific country. But what we are aiming for is to develop community standards that are universal, but that can be interpreted in a local context. So these community standards include issues such as incitement of violence, hate speech, bullying and harassment, gender-based violence, non-consensual implicit images, inappropriate imagery, things that are in many ways either a norm or a value is in violation. These are rules and policies that help govern the way the company reviews items. So in this case, for hate speech, we give thought to the idea of what incites hate around the world, and then we apply it locally. Of course, as you know, language in the Horn is very unique. We are not speaking in French or English as much as we are speaking our indigenous languages. So Facebook recognizes the importance of reviewing content in local language. Those languages include Amharic, Afan Oromo, Somali, Tigrinya, and it means that we are trying to review the content in a localized context. So this content review is done globally. We have 15,000 content reviewers around the world who review content 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And this includes Ethiopia. And our content reviewers are aimed at monitoring content which either the machine has picked up or human reviewers have picked up, and the machine being the algorithm. And so from there, we are taking proactive steps to start removing misinformation, removing content that could be deemed potentially as hateful, and also reviewing content that could be indicative of other behaviors that are in violation. The content reviewers are the first stop, but it's not the only way that Facebook monitors or reviews or responds to content. We also have staff around the world who are local language speakers who are responsible for picking up content that has been flagged and applying further context. And together, that team with my team and engineering teams, we do a very cross-collaborative global approach to specific issues, and this includes for Ethiopia. So what's important here that we really want to share is not only are our efforts to combat misinformation and hate speech proactive, but it's done in a very clearly defined process, an internal process of review by teams across the company. There is no room for arbitrary decision making. There is no room, there is no possibility, and it's not allowed for an individual to be able to make those decisions on their own. So the checks and balances internally in the company are also quite strong. The second area of policy that I want to speak about is how we review how the tech aspect of our platform goes into play. As you know, Amharic and Tigrinya are used in the Fidel, in the Ge'ez script. And so we recognize that there's a lot of content which isn't in this Western Latin script, which is all the more reason why we have content reviewers who understand the language and how we train the machine. This aspect is so critical for you to know that we can't do that fact checking and that review alone. It requires reporting from users to flag content. And the algorithm that reviews Amharic and Tigrinya particularly can improve itself to pick up what is determined as hate speech. So we rely heavily on reporting. Now, unfortunately, we have a lot more work to do in helping users, particularly in Africa, report content. And we're here to also invite you and ask you to consider the role that you play in helping us find misinformation and potential hate speech. It's in the reporting tools that we have on the platform. And I'll admit, as a Tigrinya speaker, I know that some of the language that shows up isn't translated correctly. So there is a responsibility we have as local speakers to help the company and the algorithm pick up the languages. But we also, in addition to our content reviewers and this ability of the algorithm to read languages that are non-Western script, we also have third-party fact checkers who we work with to review content as well. So those fact checkers are, we have them in Ethiopia. They are organizations committed to fact checking, and we do this around the world. So globally, we have 70 third-party fact checking organizations that we work with in different parts around the world where language and context are particularly nuanced and require a very thoughtful approach. And so for Ethiopia, we are very mindful of that and understand the need for neutrality, understand the need for objectivity in the review, and making sure that it's based on facts. A few other things that I think are important for users to know is it's very important for us to recognize the ability, the capacity of different users and how they use Facebook. And so in addition to our own internal processes and approaches for policy, part of it is also capacity building and helping train and support organizations, businesses, users of all backgrounds to ensure they know how to use the platform. And so this takes me into the partnerships approach, where in addition to developing policies internally, we develop partnerships and programs aimed at building the digital literacy of users in Ethiopia. These partnerships are aimed at primarily, when we say digital literacy, helping people see the power of not just the internet, but the power they have on Facebook. It's also, I should note from the top, that it includes Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. Platforms we know are used very heavily across the country and around the world. And these partnerships are aimed at investing in the next generation of users currently and into the next foreseeable future. And so one example of a program we have is, remember the name, it's My Digify Africa. I have to retrieve the name, just quickly escaped me. But the idea is scaling up the capacity of 20,000 people across sub-Saharan Africa to have the basic tools and knowledge of how to use Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and also basics of how to protect yourself from privacy, from hate speech, from misinformation, from potential offline real-world harm. And so through the engagements we do, these capacity building sessions are done in private. They are done in Ethiopia. They're also done in the diaspora. And together we work to remove this whole approach should signify sort of Facebook's thinking around our responsibility to ensure that the platform can be as safe as possible. It's about reducing the potential for harm. It's about removing the hate speech and misinformation that's flagged to us. And it's about informing users how to use it better. I want to just, in the interest of time, because I know we'll have questions, I want to now share a little bit about why we have a diaspora focus. Facebook is the only company, the only tech company that has a commitment to engaging with the diasporas. I think we all know, as people from the region who are familiar, understand how important it is for those of us that have left our homelands to stay connected. And before Facebook, it was an issue, a priority for everyone who's outside. It's even more of a priority now as technology has made it easier to connect. And so knowing that Africa, Middle East, and Turkey countries have migrant populations around the world that are deeply connected and deeply invested in what happens back home, we recognize the diaspora as a region of the AMET framework that Meti shared at the top. And so what that means is making sure that we're not only limited to looking at content inside Ethiopia. It's also about reviewing and understanding content and experiences in the diaspora. And so with my team, we are focused on the same approach of reducing, removing, and informing diaspora stakeholders, reducing the harm, removing information, and informing diaspora stakeholders of how to use the platform for good, how to use the platform positively, and how to help make the platform safer. For a portfolio as large as Africa, Middle East, and Turkey, what that means is really thinking strategically about which communities are heavily invested in staying connected to their homelands. We know that for the Horn as a region, these diaspora communities are deeply, deeply invested in developments back home and take proactive steps to stay connected and to address internal developments. This could be anything from economic reasons of business, organizations that are focused on community needs, social good, as well as organizations and voices who are focused on civic and political issues and human rights issues. So we spend equally, as we do for Ethiopia that I explained earlier, we spend time in the diaspora, sitting with stakeholders who we feel are invested. Now, I invite everyone to continue to help us identify where you think we should focus on the diaspora. I humbly ask, I've been invested in this region, not just personally, but professionally for over 20 years, and I have a deep love and respect for the ways that diasporas intend and attempt to help in country, but also very mindful and aware that sometimes not living in the country doesn't give you all the information, and it can be potentially harmful if you don't have the whole picture. And so really helping understand where diasporas have capacity gaps, where there is an ability to train on the platform, and how we can help diasporas even serve as helpful agents in reducing harm. Those are our huge priorities for us. I think I'll stop there because I know there's questions, but I'd like to just not only thank the organizers, but thank all of you for taking time to address this topic and inviting Facebook to be a part of the conversation. We are here with our focus intently on how to ensure the platform can be as safe as possible. And we ask that whatever ideas or options you have, ideas you have for improving the platform, we welcome that feedback. And just thank you again for your time. Meti, I think you're muted. Sorry.
Yes, thank you so much, Samhar. That has been an eye-opener, and it's refreshing to know that Facebook is committed to working together in partnerships, capacity building, and it's also very important to have someone like you with so much experience, with the background, and also with the context, because you've been working in different African, Asian, and European countries with the diaspora. You've started different movements, and that's very critical to have your input in this kinds of engagement, especially when it comes to what's going on currently. So we'll come back with you with some questions from the audience and also some questions. Thank you so much, Samhar, and stay with us. We'll throw some questions towards you in a bit. All right. So our next speaker is Dr. Getachew Dinqu. Dr. Getachew Dinqu is the director of Ethiopian Broadcasting Authority. Today we're talking about institutions and policies in fighting hate speech and disinformation. So the Ethiopian Broadcasting Authority is an autonomous federal institution established with an objective to broaden and prompt and reliable mass media that contribute to political, social, and economical development, as well as conducting monitoring which support capacity building. So Dr. Getachew leads this institution, this authority, as a director. Prior to joining the Ethiopian Broadcasting Authority, Dr. Getachew was an assistant professor and head of School of Journalism and Communication at the Addis Ababa University. Today, we invited Dr. Getachew to share with us government's works and commitment and future plans in fighting hate speech and disinformation in institutional level and using different policies. So help me in welcoming Dr. Getachew. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Getachew.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Thank
you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Matasavia. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, depending on what part of the world you're participating on this important symposium. And I would like to start by thanking the organizers, PDCI and the Ethiopian Media Council. It's a very important conversation on a timely topic, and it's a topic which is very close to our heart. We're very concerned about this phenomenon, hate speech, disinformation. I really enjoyed listening to the previous two speakers, Mr. Castro Wesamba and Samhar Araya. Thank you very much for your wonderful inputs. I really like the objective put forward for this for organizing this conversation, which is creating awareness and empowering participants. Yes, we do need to come together, discuss, bring our thoughts together, and think about time to think about how to curb this big threat of hate speech and dissemination. And it all starts with conversation. And I say good job to the organization. It's my hope that these conversations will proceed. I heard this is the fourth round, and you raised important ideas during the previous 3 rounds. Too bad I missed the 3 rounds, but fortunately you said the videos are available. I promise I will watch those. So a few points by way of remarks. My ideas pretty much overlap with Mr. Wasamba's, and I would like to start by acknowledging what he said, that hate speech is a global phenomena. It's a global threat. And then it can never be less of a threat when it comes to Ethiopia for many different reasons. It's a bigger threat, I would say, in Ethiopia, because in the last, I don't know, several years, the nature of political communication we've had is very much based on identity. It's kind of intergroup communication, I would like to call it. So when it is intergroup communication that takes the lead, and then you have in groups and out groups. So you say all kinds of nice things to your in group because you believe the in group is always right and the out group is stupid. So it's okay to say bad things to the members of the out group. So, in a way, they try to justify coming from this backdrop of intergroup communication. So this has been a very dangerous threat in Ethiopia. I don't know how many of the violence has been caused because of words and hate speech. Academics need to do empirical study on this. How many of the bad speeches led us to violent kind of conflicts? As rightly put by the previous speakers, words kill and words give life. They are either poison or fruit. And then as human beings in our communication, be it interpersonal or mass mediated kind of communication, we choose our words in our communication. And then we have to be held accountable for the words we chose. This is a simple rule of communication. So I cannot say everything I want to everyone and then go without being held accountable for whatever word I chose to use. No one forced me to choose the words I used. So that is a very important thing. And then this is where the idea of holding those people engaged in hate speeches accountable, especially those who are doing it deliberately, inciting violence, with bad intent of inciting violence. And then when it comes to I know it's very controversial sometimes what you can call hate speech and what you consider as free way of expressing your ideas, your right to freedom of speech. But our definition, the definition which is provided in the latest bill, which was passed by the Ethiopian lawmakers in March of 2020, proclamation number 1185. It's called Hate Speech and Disinformation Prevention and Suppression Proclamation. The definition provided in that proclamation for hate speech is it means a speech that deliberately promotes hatred, discrimination, or attack against a person or an discernible group of identity based on ethnicity, religion, race, gender, or disability. I would say it's pretty much in line with the definition that Mr. Wasamba provided earlier. I guess it's from the United Nations. So we are not any different. The concern is there. It is more pronounced when it comes to Ethiopia. So we responded by putting in place a bill which is supposed to address this kind of trend in the practice, in the use of hate speech, in the dissemination of hate speech. But we really wanted to capitalize on the awareness creation thing, creating awareness as to how dangerous hate speech and disinformation are, putting in place efforts in regard to fact checking and making people aware. Not every information disseminated via media is to be taken for granted as correct information, as something that is fact. So these fact-checking efforts that somehow pointed out that Facebook is doing, we have also increasing number of fact-checkers in Ethiopia as well, and we are appreciative of those efforts. And also the government on its part, yes, the bill was passed now about eight months, I think. But I don't know of many people who were put behind bars because of this bill. I believe priority is given to awareness creation, and also since this is a new bill, we are trying to digest it and then also waiting for directives as to make this thing practical. And the Council of Ministers, they are to provide directives, I guess. And then the Attorney General that championed, that initiated this bill, I think they are initiating discussions among stakeholders who will be involved in the enforcement of this bill. The Ethiopian Broadcasting Authority is one of those, Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, and a couple of others. But in the bill, if you look at it, priority is given to awareness creation. But when you have people, in some cases, who intentionally indulge themselves in the use of hate speech, you have no other options left other than holding them accountable. But the intention is not stifling press freedom at all. We're not shutting down media at all. In fact, we want the media to expand. No media was shut down. Yes, we gave feedback to some media outlets that the words they use, that the narratives they promoted were wrong. For example, don't get married to these people from this ethnic group. You know, you might have heard, those of you who are participating from Ethiopia, I know I know you know what I'm talking about. Don't get married to people coming from this ethnic background. So we had to hold media outlets like that. So all we gave them was a warning. Don't repeat these things. You know, it's bad. It will lead us to crisis. It will lead us to violent responses. And then also the social fabric, our togetherness, our unity, collaboration will be hurt as the result of these kinds of messages. So we gave them warnings. It's just, in fact, the government has been very tolerant. The criticism I have been receiving, I have been getting at the Ethiopian Broadcasting Authority, you guys are too soft. You're not taking harsh measures on some media outlets. And this comes from ordinary citizens. What does that mean? People are really concerned about the trends of hate speech on our media. I mean, the mainstream media, you know, you would expect the mainstream media practitioners to be more professional, more responsible compared to the social media, which is regarded sometimes as, you know, citizens' way of expressing their views. And then those people, they are not professionals, and then ideas don't go through the hierarchies of editorial clearing of information, and then, you know, one checking on the other, and then making sure information to be disseminated is right before they get across the general public. So overall, there are efforts in fact checking, and then also we lately embarked on a media literacy study to understand the gaps and the ways we can intervene. You know, this study was financed by UNESCO, Ethiopian Broadcasting Authority, together with University of Gondar. We are currently studying. So these study outcomes will lead us to possible areas of intervention when it comes to media literacy. The other thing is this newly passed bill. It's been very controversial, and some people were skeptical about this bill. Their fear was that the government would use it for bad intentions. Yes, I can understand it when it falls in the hands of irresponsible, undemocratic government. That is the case, but I have not seen any sort of that attempt since the bill was passed. Hopefully, the bill is used to repel these kinds of practices. You know, it will have more of a deterrence effect rather than the effect of threatening press freedom. We would definitely like the media to grow, the freedom of expression to grow, and healthy democracy to take root. But hate speech, as previously said, is bad for democracy. It undermines democracy. So it's in the interest of democracy, actually, that we have to hold irresponsible people accountable. So these are pretty much the points I like to make. I will come back by way of Q&A later on. And once again, my appreciations to the organizers, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Getachew. Yes, we'll be having Q&A, and we'll bring lots of questions towards you. But thank you for your time and for giving us your insight and what the authority has been doing so far. All right, so let's bring our now our panelists, our speakers for Q&A. We have some questions lined up for you. Well, we'll start with a Q&A, and we'll have a media professional later on for his reflection and his commitment. And after that, we'll have closing remarks. And today we'll have young people, young Ethiopians, reading out loud the peace pledge. So we have the next hour is going to be also very engaging. So thank you very much. All three of you have given us important information and direction on how to go about fighting hate speech and disinformation. So Mr. Castro, let me start with you. My question to you is, earlier you were talking about different examples. You gave us examples, for example, the Rohingya conflict that is fueled by hate speech, and also what happened in Rwanda, South Sudan, and in Bangladesh. What is there any other experience that UN has involved in, and then reverted the situation? Because these are worst case scenarios. But is there any experience that you have converted a situation fueled by hate speech and disinformation, and then brought dialogue and finally build peace within a community or within a nation?
Thank you very much, Metisebia, for the question, and thank you very much, Gateshew, for your intervention and creating a little bit more elaboration on what you're doing and what the bill is about in dealing with hate speech in Ethiopia. Specific to the question, Metisebia, we always in a contra in terms of prevention, and our mandate basically is prevention. And one of the biggest challenges is to measure prevention and how successful prevention is in terms of, like, did your action have a direct impact in preventing the situation, or there were other factors that were involved to prevent the situation. But yes, there's certain examples out there that we can allude to as prevention has had an impact on a certain huge extent. And one of it, I think, and I would like to kind of use examples that are more familiar with the people and the participants and to Ethiopia in itself. And I would more reference to what we are doing, what happened in Kenya, which is a neighboring country to Ethiopia in itself, and what role the international community, the media, international media, local participants, what they did to deal with the problem of hate speech. Because Kenya is one of those countries, and Gateshew, you may want to look at them and interact with them, because it's one of those few African countries that put legislation about dealing with hate speech and outlawing hate speech, way in 2000, 2010 or 2011, based on the post-election violence of 2007. And in 2007, post-election violence, hate speech was the main driving force behind, inciting populations and raising tensions in the country based on identity. And it was basically also mostly on political differences, but on identity basis. Of course, one of the things that we as the United Nations that were involved is basically to encourage the government to continue giving space to the media for self-regulation. And they have a very strong law that puts regulation of the media into a body that is created by the media practitioners and owners themselves to regulate the content of the media. And they were systematically, monitoring and reporting and responding in terms of clarifying issues related to hate speech on themselves. But of course, even in the wake of the post-election violence, the United Nations was very much working very closely with the Kenya National Human Rights Commission, relevant stakeholders, as Geteshua said, to put legislation of how to deal with hate speech. That eventually led into regulation in terms of what you post on social media. And Kenyans, maybe like Ethiopians, but they're very, very known on the continent for use of social media, Facebook, Twitter, and all that. And we have, they established something called the National Commission for National Cohesion and Integration Commission on itself that does the monitoring and regulation and work with the relevant stakeholders. Of course, some of the measures they put in place, of course, was very much with the support of the international community, more specifically with the United Nations, emphasizing what the standards are, what the limits are. As we say, and the Geteshua said, it's more about raising awareness, making people aware that, words are not innocent. What you're posting, think before you click, and there are a lot of campaigns that were supported and were involved in these campaigns and raising awareness about the dangers of just disseminating any information here. And down the line, of course, it does not mean that we do not have tensions, we do not have challenges in that country, but we have seen that in subsequent elections, there has been a response in terms of how to deal with hate speech on itself in a more institutionalized way, but also the international community, we can monitor based on the legal framework, national legal framework that is based over there. So at least we can confidently say that we have seen positive trends in that country in terms of the freedom of the media exists and the people are free to express their opinions. But at the same time, there are certain measures that have been put in place to raise awareness among the common population about that. And very quickly also on South Sudan. South Sudan has been affected very much by hate speech and based on identity. And as the United Nations, we have worked very closely with the UN peacekeeping mission in South Sudan. And we have put up and strengthened Radio Miraya, which is one of the biggest broadcast media in South Sudan, to use that for counter narratives, and we have trained our office specifically as deployed experts to train our UN colleagues in South Sudan in terms of how do you counter and address hate speech in that country. We have held various platforms for the diaspora. As Samna was saying, they play a very important role on the media. We have brought South Sudanese in Australia. We have brought South Sudanese in Canada and the United States to raise awareness, as they should not just be these keyboard heroes, who are posting all hate messages and their country is burning, So actually they're the ones who are fueling the tensions back in South Sudan, but they were not in South Sudan. So we worked with the governments in Australia to kind of also raise awareness among those populations. And the government of Australia was very cooperative. We had several workshops and symposiums across various cities of Australia just to raise awareness. So these are some of the good examples that I can say, raising awareness and being involved and bringing in other voices that can bring counter narratives is very, very important. but does not mean that it will completely just obliterate the challenges that we face. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Wasamba. It's important to also know that there are other stories that did not go that bad, as we have other stories that we hear every day in the media. The next question is forwarded to Samhar. Samhar Aman asked, you were speaking about community guidelines made up per region. Who makes up those guidelines, and how strongly do they influence post removals and account banning? That's a question from Aman.
Can you repeat the second half of that question?
Okay. So who makes up those guidelines, and how strongly do they influence post removals and account banning?
Yeah. So the community standards that I was referring to at the top, they're done collaboratively internally across teams who are experts and subject matter experts on the issues that I outlined before, particularly hate speech, violence and incitement, bullying and harassment, coordinated and authentic behavior. But they're done with those teams with stakeholders who are also experts in it or affected by it. So before we even develop policies, we sit with different subject matter experts, different segments of a society, and get their input. So before we can, finalize what the policy might be, it's a lot of back and forth and inputs. So we request gatherings, we host convenings and meetings where we invite perspectives from different parts of the civil society and the ecosystem globally. When it's something specific to a country like Ethiopia, we also do that with specific insights from different civil society and just stakeholders as a whole. So civil society, governmental, and trying to understand the reasonings and the impact that these policies have. And because of, as I shared earlier, because our policies are actually done collaboratively across teams, these teams are product, policy, research, operations. We've really, as a company, invested in finding the best of the best, if you will, on different subject matters, which also are locally and contextually familiar. Once those policies, I think, Aman, I shared it earlier, that even though these are global community standards, they're rooted in trying to see how they're applied locally. So there is difficulty in taking one rule and applying it globally. So we recognize taking this rule and really looking at how is it interpreted and utilized in country or in a culture or community are also critically important. So that also has its own collaborative process, which my team is a part of, where we get feedback. For Ethiopia, I want to note, we recognize the diversity of the country, the sheer size of the population, and the sheer size of the diaspora online are quite unique. And so we also have to think very carefully around the historical perspectives that are in place in the country. We have subject matter experts. We have people who are mindful and familiar with the developments of the country, not just over the last 2 years, but you can say 2 decades, you can say 5 decades, you can say modern contemporary history, understanding sort of the evolution of Ethiopia as a population, as a country, and what challenges and opportunities exist today as a result. For your second question about the post-removal, once we understand and have sort of received guidance on implications, it's a process of continuing to refine our policies with each case, with each anecdotally which ones we can learn from, and identify what's scalable. And for hate speech in particular, we need to work very closely with partners on the ground who are instrumental in building capacity to inform people what is hate speech, what is considered hate speech, and as a company, here are the policies we can operate under as Facebook. So those policies put in place do drive and shape our post-removal decisions. And we do continuously consider the situation as it develops on the ground.
Thank you, Samhar. I think Aman has got his answer. So last question goes to Dr. Getachew, and this came from Wiskov. So in places like Ethiopia, where the state provides little security to vulnerable communities, do you take hate speech as top priority? That is a question directed to you, Dr. Getachew.
Yeah, we do take hate speech as a priority, and I'm not sure if the government doesn't provide protection to communities. In as much as possible, every government is responsible for its citizens, and then by law, citizens are guaranteed with freedom to live free and safe, and they should be protected from violent kinds of reactions from other sides, be it in the form of narratives or action. So when the government passed this hate speech proclamation, hate speech and dissemination prevention proclamation, the whole purpose was to prevent communities from harm. So that is the idea after this. So it's a hate speech that grows to the level of full-fledged physical conflict. So it all starts with narratives and discourses and words. So if you don't pay attention to the communication at that level, it's only natural. It's a very natural step that it grows to the next level. So it would be very responsible and wise of the government to pay particular attention to the discourses circulating within communities, within and among communities. So in as much as possible, communities are protected, but the level of success depends on what is considered by societal members as acceptable and unacceptable. So that is why we need to capitalize on awareness and then increase intolerance to speeches, hate speeches like those, in the interest of civil dialogue, in the interest of understanding between communities, in the interest of democracy. Keep the public spaces safe for everyone, for every community members and all communities in general.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and your commitment. Thank you for coming and giving us your insight, your wisdom, what you're planning to do as individuals and as an institution. So Mr. Castro, Wesamba, Ms. Samhar Araya, and Dr. Getachew Dunku, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. And I wish you all the best. I hope we'll be working together some more on stuff in fighting hate speech and disinformation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, now we came to the next part of our symposium. Today we're winding it up. So we wanted to get a reflection from one of the participants, and today we invited Tamrat from Kumnagar magazine. He has been working in media for over 20 years. He's been engaged in conversations, and in this symposium as well has been participating. So we would like to hear from him, and I would like to invite him. And after that, we'll have a closing remark from Professor Ephraim, Director of PDCI, and also Ato Amara, Chair of the Ethiopian Media Council. And towards the end, we'll have the peace pledge read by young Ethiopians. So thank you, all of you. But the conversation continues. Make sure that you use hashtag media for peace when you post anything on Facebook, Twitter, so that other people will get engaged in this conversation. So if we have Tamrat, I hope, yes. Hi Tamrat, thank you for joining us.
Hi Matti, everybody, how are you?
Great. So you've been participating in the symposium. So how do you find it?
Yes, I have to follow the symposium, but now I have to join lately. Now I am at office. My office is just adjacent to the church. If in any bar noises or some songs from my side, I really ask excuse.
No problem.
Okay. The symposium, I was attending the first two symposium, and regarding to this hate speech, the Ethiopia Media Council is one of the main objective to promote code of ethics, and the journalist must respect and follow this code of ethics. So the journalist should follow the code of ethics of the Ethiopia Media Council. The journalist should not create violence and conflict on his news or in his reporting. In another word, he should reduce the conflict and the war news in his reporting. So if the hate speech is strictly prohibited on his reporting, if he does such news, the editor or the bosses or the media personnel should have to edit the news before delivering the news to the public. The new Ethiopia media law, as you know, Dr. Getachew mentioned, it encourage the journalists to provide accurate and balanced information. If the journalists make any such hate speeches or misinformation, the Media Council has already organized a complete organization or complete body. This complete commission is composed of a lot of civic society from the government side and from the civic society, also the prominent Ethiopian personalities, and a lot of bodies. So any person or the government side or any organization who is complained about through the medias should have to bring the complaint to this complaint commission, and they should have to give a decision according to the code of ethics who already signed it or follow the journalists or the media houses. So we are already organized this complaint commission. The next 2 or 3 months or 2 or 3 weeks, we already deliver their announcement to start to receive the grievance or the complaint from the public and the government. So we are ready to solve such hate speeches, reduce from the medias. If the journalists make such hate speeches or misinformation, I think it should be solved by the training. We have to organize a lot of trainings in such a way, especially the next this year. As you know, the government is conducted the 6th national election. In relation with this election, we have to organize hate speech and misinformation trainings for the journalists continuously. So I think the hate speech should have to solve it by training and continuous capacity building training. So I hope we should build our media more responsible and accountable to their profession, and the journalists or the media personnage serve the public to deliver the accurate and unbiased information to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamrat. Yes, that's very critical. Capacity building is the most important part of our work, and especially when media people get lots of trainings, then we can also create this peer pressure. You know, we can keep each other accountable. ተጠያቂነት በመካከላችን ማድረግ እንችላለን እና training and capacity building, that's something we should be working on. ስለዚህ yeah, that's very critical. Thank you so much, Tamrat Hailu, for giving us your time to reflect on the Symposium, also what media people and media institutions are doing in fighting hate speech and disinformation. So now we're coming to almost the last part of the symposium. And first, I would like to invite Ato Amara Aragawi. He's the board chair of the Ethiopian Media Council, and the Ethiopian Media Council is one of the organizers of this symposium, Ethiopian Media for Peace. So please help me in welcoming Ato Amara to give us his closing remark regarding these 4 sessions of the symposium. Good to have you back, Ato Amara. You're on mute, we can't hear you. Please unmute yourself. Amara is also the founder of the Ethiopian, the reporter in the English newspaper. Yes, Amara, now I can hear you. All right, thank you and welcome back.
Okay, thanks a lot. First of all, I would like to thank today's speakers, Mr. Castro, Samhar, and Dr. Getachew, for giving us very important points that we should consider in our next steps to fight hate speech. And all this is the 4th one, but the last 3 Saturdays are also very good and very useful. We have talked a lot, so the next step is to walk our talk. What we have to do is, you know, as Tamrat was saying, the Ethiopian Media Council is a self-regulatory body with already 50 media organizations, not individuals. They are registered, but also to fight hate speech. We are ready for next week to go 2 steps. First, we have already started training jointly with UNESCO, with Addis Ababa University, with Makerere University of Kenya, and all this we have finished training the trainers, and the training will start also next. And also we have a project together with the French embassy, who has already financed for the project, the Media Council. So training not only in Addis Ababa, but out in 5 regions already is planned, so we'll start all this also. But one thing we have to say is, even though it's a self-regulatory body, it's not going to be regulated by the media itself. The civil society, the people, as Tamrat was saying, from 18 organizations representatives are already selected, and already the ombudsman and the panel is created. So hereafter, when there is any complaint, nobody should go to court, nobody should go to prison. Any complaint should go to this ombudsman body, which is an independent, self-regulated body, not led by the media, but led by education centers like the university, lawyers association, women's association, from the parliament, from Ministry of Peace, and from all this. So we have created the body that will listen to any complaint from the public regarding hate speech and all this. And the good thing is, even in Africa, already African presidents and prime ministers have started to give their complaints to the Media Council rather than taking journalists to court. So this is a good step. We are ready for all this, but it's not as simple as that. We have to discuss more. We have to work hard because, as Mr. Castro said, any genocide, killing and everything starts with bad words, with bad reporting. So instead of believing in ambulance, we have to believe in first aid. So please, let's consider our points, the important points that have come, and the solutions should start as early as possible to avoid any damage on any society. Thanks a lot. Thanks very much. But this kind of discussion has to be done repeatedly to solve the problems that could appear anywhere, anytime. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ato Amara. Yes, we need to walk the talk from this moment on. Our other sponsor is PDCI, as you know, and the founder and international chairman of the board of PDCI is Professor Ephraim Yitzhak. So I would like to invite Professor to give us a closing remark as one of the sponsors of the symposium, Ethiopian Media for Peace. Thank you for coming back, Professor. You're on mute. Could you please unmute yourself?
Okay, where do I mute?
Yes, we can hear you now. So, Professor Ephraim Yitzhak, the director, the chairman of the Board of Peace and Development Center, PDCI. Oh, I think we lost them. But in the meantime, make sure that you tweet and you post on Facebook with #Media4Peace. And for those of you who just joined us today, you'll find all the videos of previous sessions, the 3 parts on Ethiopia PDCI YouTube channel. You can find them there. And now,
do you hear me? Do you hear me? Now you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Now you hear me. Okay, thank you very much, Natasabia. Before I say a few words, I would like to ask everybody to take 1 minute of silence to pray for those who are affected by the present conflict in the Ethiopia. So let me just be quiet for 1 minute. If everybody will join me with their prayers in their hearts to express their sorrow and to pray for peace. Okay, Amen. I'd like to start by expressing my gratitude to all those who helped organize this, as well as to those who participated in giving their wisdom. First, I would like to thank the key organizing members of our committee, Atokasi Kabada, Dr. Tadessa Webb, Dr. Eleni Gabramadin, and Dr. Sanait Fitsa, and Widero Mimi Alamayo. They've played as a moving force behind this organization, and I thank them very, very much. I thank Yo Adan, Telahun, and Matasabia Yilma also for facilitating these speeches. I also would like to thank the subcommittee or the main committee or the organizing committee of our PDCI, Dr. Telahun Bayene, Dr. Al-Selassie Balai, and Dr. Ahmed Moen. In addition, I would also like to express all my thanks to all members of this committee, Ambassador Johannes, Ambassador Bakala Galata, Dr. Dawood, Mamhir Gavre, Dr. Manna, Mr. Gabriel Nigatu, Dr. Kabade Benya, Adde Kulani, Wizaro Saba, Yomi, and Yo Wizaro Yo Atoyom, with Amrote Abdullah, Hannah Sadiq, and all the others who have been our friends and supporters. Now, I would especially like to express our deep, profound thanks to the speakers and facilitators and who have taken their time, who have agreed really. I was very, very impressed really with the fact that everybody who said they will speak appealed. And first of all, the first week, our keynote speaker, Mr. Mark Thompson, whose opening remarks, or well, shall we say keynote speech, has been praised by a lot of people who had contacted me and appreciated, as well as appreciated the book he has written about what's gone wrong with the language of politics. And then also that week, I thank Mr. Amara, who was one of the presenters. Second week, we had His Excellency Mr. Johnston Businjie. I appreciate his expression of the events that took place in Rwanda, and Ambassador Johnny Carson, who also spoke about the present situation, and Minister Abdi Zanaba of the Minister of Peace. Last week, we heard from Ato Aitan from PDC Ethiopia, and Mr. Obang Meto and Andrew DeWitt, and I thank them too. And then today, I would like to express my profound thanks for those who are here now, with the Samhar Araya. I think I know her family, and she did wonderful today. Mr. Castro Wasempa, who's been very friendly, speaking with me, and Dr. Getachew Dinko, whom I may have met before, but I have no idea where I could have met him. But I really thank all of those who took their time and who prepared their wonderful talks and spoken to us. Now, let me come to a conclusion by way of saying the ultimate objective and our ultimate purpose to organize this is to promote peace and focus on development in our part of the world and in the world. As long as people are wasting their energy in hate speech, in fighting with each other, the road to peace and development is closed. Hate speech and propaganda counters peace, counters development. Whether it is, of course, I'm not going to say what hate speech is, because all our experts have already elaborated very, very wonderfully on what it means. But whether it is exaggeration, whether it's falsification, whether it's fabrication, but the ultimate objective is to promote hate, maybe by people who want to get fame or make money. This is why we organize this, to stop hate speech so that we can focus on the ultimate objective of our purpose of peace and development. Maybe I'll just say a couple remarks here. When we talk about hate speech, many of us think it's something modern, something new, something we invented. It's not so. Hate speech is, we read about it in Greek literature, we read about it in the Bible already 2,000 years ago. What's happening today is because of the existence of technology, it has become, it has gotten speeded up and it has gotten generated more widely. Even in the Bible, they used to speak about false prophets. They appear, the false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive you. That's in one of the, I think that's the Christian Bible of Matthew. And there's another place it says false teachers will make a profit. They already understood this, telling you made up stories. Even in Islam, there is, I think, a word called Al-Masih al-Dajjal. I mean, false prophets are really like modern day hate speech media people. So in conclusion, then, I would like to say, let us unite, let's work together. Let us, by the way, it's my understanding that when we speak about stopping hate speech, we run into the problem of the freedom of speech. I recently also read a couple books, one by Nadine Strasser and another by Jeremy Waldron. There is always a problem whether we should control or make rules against hate speech. In some countries like England and India, I think there are some kind of rules. I understand. Maybe Mark Thompson knows more about this than I do. But the truth of the matter is, when we run into hate speech, we run into this problem of where does hate speech, what's the border between freedom of speech and hate. Therefore, I feel personally, as many people have said, what we need to do is to what they call social pressure. Social pressure, in the Bible, of course, in the others, they were teaching, the prophets were teaching against hate speech, about false prophets. So what we need today also is to find a way of us, through social speech, to focus on how we can unite to control and correct hate speech. So let us speed up, let us accelerate, let us spread truth against the fact that today our community is being affected by that hate speech. We all know that, as I said, hate speech is found even in villages where there is no technology. What technology has done is simply to speed it up, to accelerate it, and to spread it fast. But whatever, therefore, let us use the same weapons, and I appreciate Facebook and the others, to help us to stop hate speech so that we can focus ultimately what we'd like to do, to work together to make the world a better place. Let us make a world a better place where people respect each other, because the opposite of hate speech is respectful speech. Love. Let us aim at those, and may God help us to make this world a better place where there is love, peace, and then we can focus on development, help little children to grow up learning good language, good words, respectful language, respectful words. And may God again bless our effort and the effort of all those who worked with us in the last 4 weeks. I'll add only one thing. We feel now that in spite of the horrible warfare, perhaps what is even maybe more frightening to me is inter-ethnic, inter-group hate. So if God wills, we may be having also a series of symposia like this on inter-ethnic hate, coming not only from the media, but from the people, and it could be from the government. And please stay with us. Pray for peace. Pray for love. Thank you all. May God bless all those who gave us this beautiful peace. Thank you very, very, very much. Amen.
Amen. Amen, Professor. Thank you so much for all the work that you've been doing your entire life to promote peace. Thank you. So PDCI has already put up a peace pledge. You can find it on PDCI website. It's pdcethiopia.org. Please sign the pledge and affirm your commitment to peace with your signature. So you'll find it there. But today will be, we have young Ethiopians who will read the peace pledge, my pledge for one peaceful Ethiopia. So now I will invite these young people, and they are going to read the pledge, which you will find in Amharic, English, Oromo, Tigrinya, and Arabic. So I will start by inviting Zega Raswerk, Abiel Meraf, Paulos Wihib, and Yared Raswork. So Zega, take it from here.
Thank you. Acknowledging the foundational role that peace plays for Ethiopia's unity, development, and the human rights and dignity of every citizen.
Reaffirming the unwavering belief that peace can be built, violence can be rejected, and understanding and respect amongst the Ethiopian people can be created despite differing views, cultures, faith, or traditions.
Recognizing the essential role that I, as an individual and as a member of my family, community, and nation, can play to bring about peace and promote and encourage respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms for all Ethiopians, irrespective of ethnicity, culture, language, or religion.
Reaffirming that lasting peace will require working together through cooperation with all the people, political organizations, faith-based organizations, civil society, and others.
I pledge to not attack, defame, or speak evil of any Ethiopian because of his or her ethnic or religious background, to the best of my ability, to respect them and love them, work for peace among them, and work for their health, education, and economic welfare.
I pledge to strive for the protection and realization of human rights and fundamental freedoms for all Ethiopians, irrespective of their ethnicity, culture, language, or religion.
I pledge to seek and learn the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, to understand the civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights afforded, so I can exercise knowledgeably my duties as a promoter and champion of peace.
I pledge to promote peace through nonviolence as a principle and practice by choosing carefully my words, actions, and thoughts, communicating positively, and listening to others, especially those with whom I disagree with, forgiving others, and making amends when hurting another.
I pledge to speak up for peace at every opportunity and through all available means, for example, social media, and not remain silent when I see or hear of things that disturb peace and lead to suffering.
I pledge to invest in teaching the value of tolerance, mutual respect, and nonviolence to build a fair and inclusive Ethiopia, to embrace diversity.
I pledge to discuss, train, or disseminate information about tolerance, friendly relations, and peace principles, ideas, and strategies to draw public attention and advocate for their acceptance.
I pledge to discuss, train, or disseminate information about tolerance, friendly relations, and peace principles, ideas, and strategies to draw public attention and advocate for their acceptance.
I pledge to not participate by acting or by failure to act in violation of human rights and fundamental freedoms, and act courageously to reject violence and discrimination wherever they are encountered, and stand with those that are treated unfairly.
I pledge to work for the development of local, regional, and national peace clubs and promote alliance with Ethiopian and international peace organizations.
Peace begins
with each
Peace begins with each
one of us.
Thank you so much. Yes, you are right. Peace begins with each of us. Zega Raswork, Abiel Meraf, Paulos Wihib, Yared Raswork. Thank you so much. And it's always good to have young people speak about peace. So keep on speaking about peace. And we really appreciate your time here. All right. So PDCI asks every one of you participating in the symposium to go online and to sign the peace pledge. It's let's work together for one peaceful Ethiopia, and we kindly ask you to sign the pledge. You'll find it on pdcethiopia.org, and you'll find it in 4 different languages. So with this, we come to the end of the 4 parts of the symposium on Ethiopian media for peace. First week, we talked about effects of hate speech and dissemination of disinformation on intergroup conflict. Second week, we talked about the media role in confronting hate speech, dissemination, disinformation, and peace building. Third week, we talked about reducing hate speech and promoting peace dialogue on social media. And today, we talked about institutional approaches and policies to address hate speech and disinformation. And we also talked about recommendations, and we get reflections and feedback. This symposium on Ethiopian media for peace, brought to you by Peace and Development Center International, PDCI, and the Ethiopian Media Council, EMC. The online event is organized by Flawless Events, and I am Metti Shwaye Yilma. I am extremely honored and humbled to be moderating this important and timely symposium. I really appreciate every one of the speakers and participants' time and engaged commitment in promoting peace building and in stopping hate speech with us. I hope we'll come back with similar discussions and dialogue, because we're here to promote peace, and also we're here to stop disinformation and hate speech. Until next time, all of you, wherever you are, stay in peace, live peace, and radiate peace. Goodbye.